Hello there, I'm Chuck Todd, moderator of Meet the Press and the political director for NBC News, and welcome to NBCU Academy. Today we're going to discuss reporting, how journalists should collect information, and attribution, on the record, off the record, and on background. There can be a lot of confusion around these terms, so remember, journalists should always seek to be clear and try to use common language to set ground rules before you talk to any person for a story, any interview. So let's start with this. Information that is on the record. That can be used with no caveats. You might get an interview with a source, which is another way of saying a person that you get information from for a story. If your source agrees to be on the record, that means that if your source gives you a quote, you can quote the source by name, put the exact words, note where they work, other identifiable information about them. And for television's purposes, it means putting them on camera where their face is clearly visible and you can display their name. Remember to state clearly that the conversation is on the record while in conversation with your source at the beginning of the interview. Now, if a source wants to share information with you on background, this means that the information can be published, but only under conditions negotiated with that source. Normally it means no name or exact title can be used of the person that gave you that information. Examples of this can be a, quote, senior White House official, or a, quote, source familiar with the plans. The reporter and their editor need to come to an agreement about how we can characterize an anonymous source like that on TV or in an article. Anonymous sourcing can be a very sensitive issue, and it is important not to rely too heavily on anonymous sources, and certainly not on a single one. Remember that a source must have direct knowledge of a situation in order for any information to be reportable. They must be a primary source, even if they want to be anonymous. Now, if a source asks for your conversation to be off the record, this means it cannot be used for publication. No quotes, no paraphrasing, no summarizations. This information should not be repeated to another source or anyone outside of colleagues working directly on the story, like perhaps another reporter or your editor. Off the record is something a lot of people can be very confused about. As journalists, we should try to use plain language and make it clear when something will not be reported on. It's basically like the equivalent of getting a news tip without being able to use any information from the tipster with that person, but you go somewhere else. Reporters must agree to an interview being off the record in advance. For example, a source might say something on the record, get nervous about what they said, and then afterwards ask for it to be off the record. As a reporter, you are not obligated to have to make any of that information off the record. That is up to you. Now that we've explained on the record, on background, and off the record, here's some things to remember. If you are talking to a source who is unfamiliar with journalistic terms like on and off the record, then explain the terminology to them using the simplest terms you can so they understand how your conversation with them will be used. You don't have to use those phrases on the record, off the record, be on TV, in the newspaper, things like that. And set these ground rules at the beginning. Journalists always consider why a source wants to be off the record and offer only background information. In some cases, we do agree to not naming a source if necessary to report the information because they just don't want to be associated with the information, or maybe they think it'll get them in trouble. As reporters, our job is to see if we can get them to give us the information on the record. Always consider if the information is reliable, accurate, and factual, and ask yourself why they don't want to be on the record in the first place. And remember, background or off-the-record information does not absolve the journalist from basic fact-checking of that information. Now, sourcing can be complicated, but we hope that these lessons can make your interviews and your reporting go much more smoothly. Interested in learning more about reporting and sourcing? Check out our other lessons on reporting on NBCUacademy.com or follow us on social media. For NBCU Academy, I'm Chuck Todd. Thanks for watching.